Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another episode of Genesis Automotive. I'm Jasen. This morning was a little crazy. I got asked to bring a car to Honda because Donut Media is doing a video right now. So I brought my buddy Mark's EP here, and can't really show a whole lot. I don't want to step on their toes, but I'm sure you'll see their episode. They're just doing a whole lineup of Civics, which is pretty cool. And then since we're here, I'm going to meet up with one of the guys from Honda. His name is Carl. He takes care of the Honda Museum, and I work with him, basically maintaining their cars for them and taking care of stuff. So they have actual running cars for events like this and things. We're gonna meet up with him later. I wish I could show more of what Donut Media is doing, but you know, don't want to burn bridges. I'll see you later. Oh, nothing but fun and games here. Today we are at the Honda Museum. I've had the opportunity to come and witness this place for the first time. Never been here, and I have my buddy that I work with, Carl.
How you doing, mate?
What's up, man?
Hey guys, how's it going?
I got introduced to him and his buddy Brad through a mutual friend, Tim Ming, and in that journey, I was chosen to maintenance these cars.
Yep.
Carl gave me the chance to come in here and check out what we got and see what's going on, and maybe he can do a little bit of talking and explain some of the stuff, how it works in here.
Hey, I'm Carl Pulley, and I'm the Western Media Relations Manager for American Honda, but also I manage the American Honda Collection Hall. And so it's really a kind of secret museum, but there's going to be some big news about that. In that many years ago, one of our VPs decided that we needed to kind of start to record some of our history. So this is the result. It's in a warehouse building. There's no signage on the walls. No one would know when you walk by that this includes a collection of vehicles that are kind of important to American Honda. There is some exceptions, and I'll point to one in a moment. But basically, these are the vehicles that really made American Honda grow, and then by extension, Honda Motors Japan grow. And there's a big celebration next year because Honda Motors turns 75, and I'm working with the Japanese team with sending some of our vehicles over because they want to celebrate the contributions that the American market has made to the success of Honda Motors over those 75 years.
And to keep that in mind, I have their 83 Honda Accord at the shop, which he gave me last week and wants it done in 2 weeks. And it has not ran in 10 years. Do a little work to it, but other than that, it's working out pretty good.
Fantastic. Well, let's have a look around. So this vehicle, this little beauty, was never sold in the US, but it's the first car that Honda Motors produced. And it's an interesting story in that after World War II, when Japan was kind of reindustrializing after the war, they looked at different companies to help kind of, raise the industries in very different ways. Mr. Honda was already making motorcycles. First produced engines to strap onto bicycles, then produced bespoke motorcycles, and he went to the government in Japan and said, I want to build cars now. He said, no. You build motorcycles. We have Toyota, we have, we have other manufacturers that are making cars. So kind of in secret, because he was a bit of a rebel, Mr. Honda, he designed and built this S600, 600cc car, and then he went back to the Japanese government, says, okay, I want to produce cars. No. And he says, well, yes, I already have a car, and this was the car. So then they're like, oh, okay, that looks good. We'll allow you to build it. So it was never sold in the US. The story that we got from it when we bought it locally, it was actually for sale here in Torrance. And so a previous manager of the museum found out about it and said, we've got to buy that. It was sold in Switzerland, and there was a US serviceman who was stationed in Germany and visited Switzerland and ended up buying it. And then when he came back stateside, he brought the car with him.
So I have a couple of questions. One is, the steering wheel's on the left side.
Yep.
And it was built in Japan?
It was built in Japan.
Now why?
But for an export market.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that explains it.
So yeah, so in Europe, so obviously Japan right hand, UK right hand,
Yes.
Other places right hand, but obviously in Europe, in Switzerland, then it was left hand drive.
Got it. Okay.
But anyway, I mean, a little gem of a motor, 600 cc, revs to like 15,000. I mean, it was absolutely insane. It's not a motorcycle engine. People think, oh yeah, well, Honda's design motorcycle engines. They put a motorcycle engine. It was a bespoke car engine, but they used the development of their motorcycle with those high revving engines, with those short stroke engines, to be able to produce a car. So not a lot of torque, but the horsepower is up because
now
of
this
the
is rear wheel drive.
This is rear wheel drive.
So there you go. Rear wheel drive Honda, first car.
Yeah. But then
front engine.
To the N600, and these are the first vehicles that were sold in the US. Well, the first cars that were sold in the US. They didn't hit the ground running, to be honest. I mean, obviously, you can imagine in 1970 the huge land yachts of domestic vehicles that were around. I mean, basically, you get one of those huge coupes. The doors were longer than this entire
like the
car.
Cadillacs.
Been like the Cadillacs. But the interesting thing is, this was sold for about $1,600, and it weighs around 1,600 pounds. So the kind of joke is that it's $1 a pound.
$1 a pound.
$1 a pound. And so then this Z600 was a little bit of a sportier version, still very small, obviously some upgraded styling. I mean, really, this does look to me like a 70s car. I mean, I'd imagine like Scooby-Doo and all of the characters, when they're not in the mystery van, I can imagine them driving one of these, especially in this color. So as we move down, this one is one of my favorites just because it's so of the era. This is a mid-80s Civic Wagon. And this really leads to what we'll see in a couple of cars, which is the first CR-V. This is us kind of making a little bit of a higher ground clearance, a little bit more of an upright, but all-wheel drive Civic. So it's very funky. I love the houndstooth cloth interior.
Yes.
I mean, again, it's very, very iconic of the era. And I love the color. Everything about it is so cool for that mid-80s era. But it was Honda giving something additional. It was added value in that there was a lot more room, had all-wheel drive for inclement weather.
Yep.
I mean, look at that greenhouse. I mean, it's like, being in a fishbowl. I mean, back in the day, they didn't have the crash requirements for rollover, so the pillars are as thick as my
What's funny
finger.
is like looking at it, it reminds me of like a Burberry trench coat because I was like the color and then the interior is like the.
That is fantastic. So, talk about enthusiast cars. This is one of our iconic enthusiast cars, the S2000, and this is the last generation, and it's a 2009 CR. Now, this particular vehicle, we have a couple in our collection, but this one was literally a barn find with American Honda. So this was in a training center, technical training center in Texas. So it's probably had its brake pads changed 300 times, but it has less than 300 miles on it. Now, fairly recently on Bring a Trailer, a car that had around this amount of miles sold for $200,000. And so basically they, someone found it and said, hey, what are we going to do with this? And they're like, oh, contact Carl, maybe he wants it in the museum. So it may only be here for temporary display because what the idea is, this is so valuable. I mean, it's like a brand new car right off the showroom floor that we're considering donating it or having a charity auction. So then, auctioning it off to the highest bidder, and then that money will go to charity. So
that's really cool.
That will be the case. Okay, so we talked about the Civics.
Yes.
Obviously, the N600 being our first car, but the one that really set us on the map with the Civics. But then in the mid-70s, Honda came out with the first family car. Now, obviously, the Accord now, I mean, this is 1976, looks small in comparison to modern day, but obviously it was much, much larger, much more luxurious than the Civic, and it really, really was a great companion for those people that wanted to move up to get something a little bit larger than the Civic. Of course, Then we had the Accord. You know, this is the first generation, and now we're on the 11th generation,
Yes.
just like we're on the 11th generation of the Civic.
This is the one I like.
I mean, it's a beautiful
Yeah.
color, and the thing is, it's, you know, this mid-90s design, and again, this is a coupe where, you know, when you take the Accord and you only have 2 doors, I mean, the styling looks so much nicer, and it's almost like that enthusiast car that's a little bit bigger, and you still
Yes.
see that, right? I mean, you know, everyone thinks about like the tuner community with the Civics, but then people love the
Right.
Accords too.
So what I liked about it was the Wagon.
Oh yeah.
The Wagon one, that was a hit. That was really cool.
So another vehicle that we don't currently
Had
have a
one.
model for is the Prelude. So another, you know, a coupe, a sporty coupe. So again, we talked about, you know, the sportiness of the Civics and the Accords, but then you come up with something that's a dedicated sporty coupe made by Honda.
Yep.
And obviously the Preludes over the years have been well sought after, as well as being an enthusiast vehicle.
Yeah,
as
because
well.
I had one of these.
Oh really? That's fantastic. What
Yeah.
color was yours?
Great, just like that.
Fantastic. And as
Yep.
you can see, as we come through from the 70s, the 80s, and then this one's a bit special because this is an early 90s, and it has the 4-wheel steer, and that
Right.
this thing is incredible. I mean, it's insane. I mean, talk about parallel parking with ease.
Yeah.
I mean, this thing is incredible. I mean, it literally pivots around
Yep.
its middle.
I remember
But
that.
then it feels natural when you're driving it at regular speeds as well. All right, kind of, you know, we talk about a little bit of sportiness, and probably the ultimate of sportiness is the race car. And Honda has been involved with racing from the very, very beginning. Motorcycles, you know, Honda Son said, you know, we're going to win at the Isle of Man TT races on motorcycles.
Yep.
And, you know, it only took him a few years and he won. He said, one of these days we're going to win a Formula One. And you know what? We did, and we continue to as well. And so Formula One hasn't been as big in the US, although this past season, I think
We have 3 tracks now.
more viewers,
Yeah.
and then more tracks, and so it's becoming more popular.
Oh,
But
yeah.
obviously, IndyCar is something that,
Oh, yeah.
that we've been involved with for a while, and so you can kind of see some transitions of some of our early prototypes through to championship-winning cars. So obviously we've got, with open wheel, it tends to be Honda sponsorship, but when we talk about prototypes, IMSA cars, then that's Acura. In fact, you know, Acura went racing before Honda did technically, and it was one of the ways to establish the brand as a performance brand.
Right.
So rather than just a luxury brand, it was a performance brand. That's what we continue to this day, obviously with the NSX, and then the Integra. We just announced the Integra Type S, which is incredibly exciting. But one car I want to point out, which is, this is a first generation Civic race car. It was nothing to do with Honda as the motor company. It wasn't sponsored. It was a guy who worked at a dealership. He was a mechanic.
Oh, okay.
And he raced. I think he was based in the Northeast. And you can see down here, across the top of the door, he was a national winner so many times. I mean, literally, this is a front-wheel drive, basically a stock vehicle with roll cage to make it, you know, race-worthy. And the question was asked to the son, how come your dad wins so many championships? He said he finished every race. And that's the difference between the Civic and all of the other cars of the era. I mean, he was racing Lotuses
Right.
and things of that nature. You know, basically dedicated sports cars.
It was just endurance.
And it was just endurance.
Yeah,
It's like, you know, to finish first, you've got to finish, right? So, so this was kind of great. They donated it to the museum, and it's a nice little kind of piece. I mean, it's even got Band-Aids on it where it's been broken. I mean, you know, typical kind of club racing kind of car, and it's just fun. Talk about racing. We talked about how this first generation Civic won so many championships is because it finished all the races. And this car did more than finish races, it got 1 million miles. So again, this was based in the Northeast, and it was a Honda employee who he was a service rep, and he would go to dealerships all around New England area, and kind of check to make sure they're doing things the right way, kind of give them tips and stuff like that.
Right.
So he drove this, and he was an advocate that if you just change the oil, if you did the regular maintenance, the car would last forever. And so you can kind of see some stats here. So this is a 1990 Honda Accord LX, so it's the lowest trim, but 185 oil changes, 72 tires, 31 transmission fluid changes, 13 sets of front brake pads, and then 9 timing belts. The transmission, the engine, fuel injectors, all of this is all stock and original. The only thing that had to be changed at 741,000 had to replace the fuel pump. And so, you know, this was actually the person who owned this vehicle, you know, he let us know about it. And so it was one of our very, very first social media campaigns. And we went to his hometown. We had the local high school band and the cheerleaders.
Cool.
And we had a parade down Main Street. And we did, obviously, you know, living in New England with all the salt and the snow and things that happen, we did some body work to make it look a lot nicer than it is now. But yeah, we kind of made a big deal about that because 1,000,000 miles is something that's pretty amazing. And then to completely change things, then we have this unicorn here, which was it was a collaboration with Super Street and Hot Wheels, and there was a competition to create a super cool Civic that then Hot Wheels, as you can see on the dash, created a car for it. So,
and I do remember this car from back in the day, and it's pretty cool.
Yes, yeah, so
it's cool seeing the old
Radwood, and people were kind of wowed by it because it was totally within that.
Yeah, it's very correct.
Yeah, absolutely. This is what we call a white body, or a body in white. So this is the first generation NSX, and you know, it was very, very unique because of its all aluminium body.
Yes.
And which continues with the second generation, although you know there's some other things like the floor plan that's carbon fiber, and you know we use some other high strength materials. So yeah, this is basically what would be created. And obviously there's cutouts to kind of show
the
how
structure.
Some elements, are created for display. But you know, if those things weren't there, this would be what would be dipped in the paint tank before they start to bolt everything to it. So we have one of these for the first generation, also we have one for the second generation as well. These are sort of things we'd take to auto shows because then people see how unique it really is.
It's just cool because like it's funny how the entire car bolts together, like the quarter panel comes off, the side pillars come off, the trim comes off. The only thing that's painted on this car is just the roof.
Yeah.
Like that's it. Like once you dismount everything, you can paint this whole entire car like somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then bolt it all together.
And that's the thing about designing a vehicle is, you know, how do you know, there's one thing designing and engineering, but then you have to engineer how do you make it. And then, okay, how many panels do we have to have and how do we fit it? Plus, there's the repair component.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, well, you know, yes, we can do this manufacturing wise, but then if someone, I mean, you can imagine if you had one panel, including the rocker that came all the way up, you know, potentially that's you can manufacture that, but what if you get a little ding on here and then you have to replace the whole thing?
So
then
if
it
you know,
will increase the repair costs.
So if you know, like Ferrari, like the 360 and the 430, you know, it's all, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
you know, that's,
saying.
You know,
It's one piece.
It's one piece.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's great. It probably saves a little manufacturing and also with assembly, but what if? And it's all the same thing. Yeah. It's all aluminum and this competed with the Ferraris of its day, but was such a performance bargain. But it was built from a company that knows how to make everyday vehicles. And that's the difference. Something that's reliable, still has incredible performance, but it's, you know, somewhat affordable to be able to maintain and
people still
repair.
Like, you take it out, people still like it.
Well,
it doesn't.
Since we talked about that, why don't we have one with all these clothes on? Honda was the first Japanese company to come out with a luxury brand, which was Acura, and we first came out with the Legend, and then the Integra.
Yes.
And back then, we realized that people loved the Accord, but then they got to a point where I can afford more luxury, I want something with a little bit more performance. And so, but we didn't have anything. And so it was really an American Honda invention, the Acura brand, is to be able to kind of retain some of those customers that may end up really kind of incoming out of our brand.
Right.
So the whole idea with Acura is to come out with, especially with the Legend, to come out with something that was powerful, a 6-cylinder as opposed to the 4 cylinders of the Accord of today, something that had a lot more luxury to it, a lot more amenities. And so this was a huge, huge hit. And back then there was really a huge gap between mainstream brands and luxury. No one had anything in between. And also the luxury brands, especially the Europeans, weren't particularly reliable.
That motor they're both sister motors. Like if you look at them, they're both the same.
Yeah.
So it's just pretty cool. That one's, obviously a single cam, and that one's, the twin cam, but yeah, it's pretty cool. Cause like when you look at it, you can fit NSX parts like on that motor.
Obviously these two, just sold like hotcakes. Acura dealers were printing money. And so for a few years there, Acura sold more luxury cars in the US than all of the European manufacturers together, because there was that gap in between. Now, since then, obviously, then we had Infiniti, and we had Lexus come on board, and then you have manufacturers like BMW and Mercedes that kind of come down market a little bit. So now that big gap in between the mainstream and the luxury no longer exists, because you look at today's Accord, and that has so many luxury features to it already. So that's where Acura as a performance brand, and that's how we kind of remarketed it again.
These two cars right here was the Acura brand.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was it. Just these two cars on the lot. That was it.
Yeah. So then, obviously, kind of going back to the NSX.
Yeah.
And, in 1991, this is when we came out with the supercar, and it actually just blew everyone's mind. Not only the fact that we could do such a thing, but also how well it handled it. So many people tell me if I could afford a luxury car that I'd drive every single day, it'd have to be the NSX, because nothing else would be able to do it.
Right.
Nothing else would be able to drive every single day to and from work, and then just be incredibly fun on the weekend.
I get customers that have like 280,000 miles on those cars. They just keep going.
And it's interesting. You probably heard about it. So we hosted Radwood a few weeks ago, and it's the 50th anniversary of the Civic, but also the 30th anniversary of the Type R. And the first Type R was a 1992 NSX Type R, and we had someone who brought a right-hand drive, gray market import, and I got to drive it. So it was just from where it was on display into our basement. But obviously, you can tell from my accent, I grew up in a country where, I learned to drive on the right side of the vehicle.
You felt at home.
So, that stick shift was kind of just like when I first learned to drive, although I couldn't imagine driving anything as cool as the NSX Type R when I was first learning.
I know, right?
But, basically, this collection is really a celebration of vehicles that made American Honda, how successful it is to this day. So, there's a lot more that I'd like to buy. There's a lot more that I want you to help us with getting back on the road, because one of the great things about our collection is that I love to give them to members of the media to drive.
I got a question. A lot of these cars, were they donated, or did someone collect them back in the day?
No, it wasn't.
Or were they stuck in a warehouse that you guys own?
It was really a little bit of everything, because as I mentioned before, we're always a progressively thinking company, looking what we can do more and more for the customer. So we really didn't consider our history until fairly recently. So it wasn't as if we're like, okay, VIN number 1, that's put off to the side for a museum. We never did that, because every one of these vehicles has significant amount of miles on them. Some of them, like that CRV, there was a Honda employee that drove it from new, raised his family in it, and then offered it up to the museum.
That's cool.
That happens a lot. So someone that's like, okay, I think this is an important vehicle for the museum, I'm gonna donate it, or I'm gonna offer to sell it. Some of them we realize, you know what, we need one of these. Let's go and find one and buy it. Some of them are maybe pre-production vehicles that would otherwise need to be crushed, but they're sitting here in the museum, so that's fine. Some of them were, rep vehicles. Some of them were lease vehicles for Honda employees. So we kind of got them in various different ways. But, what I like about that is that they've all been used.
Yes.
And that means, because that's what a car's meant to be driven, a motorcycle's meant to be ridden. And so, you know, what breaks my heart is when someone buys a car and it's like, okay, it's brand new, but I'm going to put it aside because it's going to be a collector vehicle.
Sitting does worse than driving.
I want this to be a moving, living collection of vehicles to celebrate our company,
right,
but also to get them out there in the media so people can drive them, people can see them. And who doesn't have a Honda story? Anyway, well, I thank you for helping us restore these vehicles.
And I appreciate it.
I appreciate your interest in Honda products.
Hey, I just want to say thank you for taking your time out showing it, because I know it's getting late and you got things to do, pick up kids. But like I said, I really appreciate it and giving me your time. That's really cool. So thank you once again.
You're welcome,
I appreciate it. So once again, this is the Honda Museum, and we got a really fun tour. That was pretty cool. So we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks a lot.